Good evening. It is another amazing day here in paradise. And if you're not having wonderful days and the recognition that you're in paradise, then you need the book. And this is the book, A Course in Miracles. It is a transformative and incredibly powerful process that you go through as you are guided to creating an entirely different way of perceiving the world around you and identifying yourself with the truth, as opposed to this false sense that most of us have become hypnotized by. And of course, that is the ego, ego. It's always there. It's always pervasive. It's always trying to convince us that we are separate and apart from each other and from our source, from our creator. So it looks like we're I'm not seeing anybody showing up yet, but I will assume that some people will join me as I continue to babble here. Oh, there's Charlie. Hi, Charlie. Nice to have you join me tonight. And sure we'll have a few other people. Yes, Lisa's now on board. And the tribe is gathering. How cool is that? Humanity Healing is with us also. So I'm assuming that's Liani. Deborah Knight. Hello from Wisconsin. That's a state right above the state that I'm in. And that's something to ponder. Are you in the right state? We're all in a state, but collectively, the ideal state is to be in that state of the awareness of the presence of God in our every activity. So anyway, this evening, as I have been doing in the past, we're going to start off by looking at a lesson from A Course in Miracles. And this is a really good lesson because, it really gives us a true understanding of the nature of our Creator and the nature of ourselves. This is all the way back to the end few lessons from the workbook. This is lesson 321 from the study material. And this particular lesson is something that I found to be very powerful, in that it clarified so much for me. Because, when you first come into A Course in Miracles, you generally have this concept of the world around you and all these separate fragmented parts and pieces and all these other individuals separate and apart from you. And that is an illusion. That is a false creation that we conjured up in order to experience this brief moment of time, because we come from eternity. We exist in eternity. But in order to experience this sense of separation, we had to create a false reality, and that reality is ruled very effectively by time. The timeline has always got us trapped. There's a time to be born, and a time to die, and a time to do all these different things in between. And, Bob Dylan put that little bit of poetry from the Old Testament into music form with his song, To Everything There Is a Time and a Season. So in this realm of seasons and times, when we're able to actually step out of that trap of time, we suddenly experience a reality that is so indescribable by human standards that we really struggle to actually convey the experience to those around us. And of course, that's part of our job, is to help others around us gain access to that truth that is fundamental to our true nature, which is that we are eternal beings and we live outside and apart from time. So being dwellers in eternity, yet having an experience in the limitation of time, is quite an exciting and dynamic experience. The only problem with all of that is that time runs down, and so we croak and generally wake up in a new body, in a new life, and experience that same start to finish kind of adventure over and over and over again. And eventually, you know, I mean, how many times do you want to die? And how many ways do you want to die before you finally recognize that this is becoming tiresome and unnecessary? And all the tears and tragedy that we suffer through in order to have this brief period of self, of ego, and how damaging that ultimately can be. So anyway, this starts off with, what is creation? Creation is sum of all God's thoughts, in number infinite, and everywhere without all limit. Only love creates, and only like itself. There was no time when all that it created was not there, nor will there be a time when anything that it created suffers any loss. Forever and forever are God's thoughts exactly as they were and as they are, unchanged through time and after time is done. So going back to, you know, the biblical concept of God's creation, we have, you know, man and woman and apples and all sorts of objects. The religious interpretation of God's creation is objectified, all these objects. In the Course in Miracles, we're given a whole different understanding of creation. And creation is a process where God extended itself. So God's total and consummate creation is simply you and I as the replication of God, held forever in the mind of God. So basically, we are God in expression. This is the way God creates. This is the way God expresses itself. So all of creation can be summed up as the sonship, as it's referred to in A Course in Miracles. And of course, that's really not a gender-oriented thing, because we are so far beyond gender in our true identity that we look at masculine and feminine and all the absurdities associated with that, and we can kind of laugh at it, because we realize that the truth of who we are is total. And because we were created in that image and likeness of God, we have that nature that God has to repeat that process. So our true existence is this process of creating ourselves as our own children, is probably the most comprehensible way of identifying the process. But the truth is, we are extending love in all directions, at all times, in all dimensions, because that's what God did to create us. So there is this completely abstract process going on that people really, when you first begin to recognize the magnitude of this, you really struggle with it, because we are so confined in our attitudes and belief systems to these singular objects. And the truth is, the abstract nature of God and our abstract nature goes so far beyond what can be summarized in concrete terms that it becomes, like I said, very laughable. It's absolutely absurd. Imagine going to the Guggenheim and walking into a room where there is a giant panel by Jackson Pollock hanging on the wall. And Pollock's work, I think, is probably the most abstract of all of the abstract painters. And as you walk into the room, you can see a couple of people over in one area struggling to find something to attach themselves to in the painting. You know, one says to the other, "Oh, look, there's a rabbit over in this lower left corner." And the other one says, "Oh, I'm seeing a star up here in the right corner." You know, and then there's the group of people who walk in and completely can't connect. And their conversation is usually around the idea of, this is all absurd, this is just stupid, anybody could do this, he's just dribbling paint on canvas, and you know, all these fancy intellectuals are calling it art. And then there's the third type of person that walks in and looks at it and has absolutely no judgment, who is able to just experience this state that Pollock was in when he was in this creative flow. And they don't need to define anything. They don't need to understand anything, because it becomes completely experiential. And they themselves become the painting. They themselves recognize within all of this abstraction that there is a fundamental source of the desire to create that is pouring forth. And that desire to create is the act of love. See, God in its early state, as it created us, was acting from the level of love. It was extending love because it knew itself to be love. So when we start looking at the truth about God and God's creation, we move into a completely different realm of consciousness and understanding. And that's why it's so very, very vital to not try to define God. The minute you start to put a perimeter around that which is infinite, then you start to create a box for yourself. You box yourself in at the same time. So when we are approaching that contact point, when we are entering into meditation, when we are entering into a state of prayer, it is absolutely vital that we step into that state without any preconceptions. You know, one of my favorite lines from the New Testament is that line, "Father, reveal thyself to me." So that way you are approaching the divine without any definitions and sliding into a space where the divinity within you reveals itself to you. And that is an ecstatic experience. That is an uplifting and fulfilling experience that renews you. You know, Jesus told us in the Bible, "I die daily." What did he mean by that? Well, he stepped out of that personality of Jesus and stepped into the personality of God, his source, his creator. And that's how we should approach our spiritual practice, is to come with humility, to come with appreciation, and to come with the expectation that we will be fulfilled. Because when you call upon God, God doesn't ignore you. You just have to make yourself receptive to what God is trying to offer you. And that does not include any kind of practice or any kind of discipline or any kind of anything. You know, in A Course in Miracles, one of the things that is highlighted on numerous occasions is that when we step into that presence, we need do nothing. We're shutting down our mind, we're shutting down the brain chatter, we're shutting down all of these different anticipations and entering into a space of expectation. And there is definitely a very clear difference between the two. That which you anticipate is what you've already created definition for in your mind. But when you're stepping into this expectation of having the revelation of God come through so that you can actually experience God in the most profound ways, then God is always there to fulfill that expectation on your behalf. So this lesson goes on to say God's thoughts, you and I, we are God's thoughts, are given all the power that their own creator has. So God didn't withhold anything. God just says, okay, I'm going to reproduce me, and this is, you know, this is my creation. This is the joy of creation. This is the ecstasy of love. For he would add to love by its extension. So God knew in this process of creation that he would enhance or expand or explode the whole process of love by recreating him, her, itself. Thus his sons share in creation and must therefore share in power to create. And this is an underlying urge for every human at some point in their life. They have this desire to express themselves, to create, whether it's the process of having children, the process of doing a magnificent painting, creating a symphony. I mean, it just goes on into infinity. The directions are this creative urge can take. But ultimately, when we come to the final chapter in our, stages of awakening, we come to that point where we recognize the only thing really worth creating is that extension of love. Everything else is going to be trapped in time. It's ephemeral. But when we are sharing love, we are at our peak moment in our existence. What God has willed to be forever one will still be one when time is over. So this illusionary life we're engaged in right now, where we hate this guy and love that guy and have all of these dualistic experiences going on in our mind, is going to fade away at some point. And we're going to discover that everybody that we truly hated in a physical form, in a physical lifetime, was an illusion. And that the truth is that person and you are one and the same. You are God in expression. So one and will not be changed throughout the course of time, remaining as it was before the thought time began. So all of this is in a process of unwinding. And as we are unwinding it, what is happening is we are restoring our consciousness, our awareness, our identity to the truth of who we are. And in that process, we restore everyone around us. We are able to look upon everybody, no matter how hideous it appears that they have been in this lifetime, with forgiving eyes. And again, we have to look at the way that Jesus handled every situation he encountered. He forgave over and over again. even to the point where being crucified, he was able to say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. So that's the journey we're on. And we won't have to go through that hideous experience of personal crucifixion, but we will have to crucify our ego. And by crucifying it, we simply let go of it. It is no longer of any value to us. So that's, you know, a very powerful set of ideas that have been shared with us in this particular lesson, defining God's creation and coming to a new comprehension of who we are in relationship to that is a very, very important part of our own unfolding. It goes on to say, creation is the opposite of all illusions, for creation is the truth. Creation is the Holy Son of God, for in creation is his will complete in every aspect, making every part container of the whole. And that was what I was talking about with the Jackson Pollock analogy, the abstract nature of God, and how you cannot segregate and fractionate God's creation, because it is an abstract state of being. And at the core of that, at the foundation of that, is this incredible buoyancy that comes through pure love, the expression of love, the recognition that you are love in itself, and even greater, the recognition that you are God in itself. So when you start really looking at the depths of the Creator and the creation, you begin to realize how truly profound and beautiful this whole process is. And it is going on throughout eternity, throughout all existence, in every way, shape, and form. So how beautiful is that? It says, we are creation, we the sons of God. We seem to be discreet and unaware of our eternal unity with him. Yet back of all our doubts, past all our fears, there still is certainty. And there's always that underlying sense of, I am more than what I think I am in this particular moment. See, there's always that hope that exists within our consciousness that comes from that realization on a deep and profound level within the subconscious that we are a profound and perfect expression of something that is so incredibly indefinable and beautiful that, you know, it gives us that hope. And when our days are drawing to a conclusion in a particular lifetime, that hope still keeps us clinging to some aspect of what we're identifying life with. Sometimes it's the body, sometimes it's the recognition, oh, I can step out of this body and go back to a different state of me. So it's pretty amazing what has been given to us. And if you stop and look around at the world that we have created as an alternate to that, it's pretty damn grisly. People are killing people. Nature is killing people. Things are being blown up. Children are being hacked into pieces. I mean, this world that we have generated, even with all the little beautiful baubles and enticements, is in fact a slaughterhouse. And we have to be willing to really stand up to that understanding. So anyway, that is the lesson for this week. And now we're going to go into the text just briefly, just for a couple of minutes here, and take a look at the beginning of chapter 6, which is as we're moving forward in the Course in Miracles and text, we're gaining more and more understanding of self, and at the same time, we are learning to soften our attitude toward those around us. And chapter 6 is very, very potent in that it starts off with its description, the lessons of love. The relationship of anger to attack is obvious, but the relationship of anger to fear is not always so apparent. Anger always involves projection of separation, rather than being blamed on others. Which must ultimately be accepted as one's own responsibility, this sense of separation, rather than being blamed on others. Anger cannot occur unless you believe that you have been attacked, that your attack is justified in return, and that you are in no way responsible for it. So this whole process of what this world defines as justice is basically, essentially, just a form of revenge. And the only time that revenge could ever possibly work would be in a state of separation, where you did not consciously attract your experience in life to you. See, so this is putting the full responsibility back in our court and forcing us to look at the truth around all the beliefs that we have been vulnerable, we have been victims, we have been, hideously misused. And therefore, if we take action and smack the snot out of somebody, it's all very justifiable. And the truth is, you created the conditions. It says, anger cannot occur unless you believe that you have been attacked, which I had just read. Given these three wholly irrational premises, the equally irrational conclusion that a brother is worthy of attack rather than of love must follow. What can be expected from insane premises except an insane conclusion? The way to undo an insane conclusion is to consider the sanity of the premises on which it rests. You cannot be attacked. Attack has no justification, and you are responsible for what you believe. You have been asked to take me, Jesus, as your model for learning, since an extreme example is a particularly helpful learning device. And this is what I was talking about when I was, highlighting the fact that Jesus went through this entire process and experienced the crucifixion and transcended it and forgave everybody for everything that appeared to have happened. And in essence, Jesus, in this statement right here, is saying that he created these conditions to be crucified so that he could show all of us the error of our thinking. So he was not a victim in any way. He was going through a conscious process of teaching the world the basic premise of what life is. And life is love. And love forgives. There's a passage where one of the apostles approaches Jesus and says, Master, how many times must I forgive my neighbor? And Jesus says, 7 times 70, and then again. In other words, an infinite number of times. You're supposed to always forgive. That's supposed to always be your response. And that's what he exemplified in his journey on this planet. He goes on to say, everyone teaches and teaches all the time. So your actions are important because you are teaching the world what you believe. This is a responsibility you inevitably assume the moment you accept any premise at all. And no one can organize his life without some thought system. Once you have developed a thought system of any kind, you live by it and you teach it. So is your thought system an eye for an eye? Because that's the old law. That's the old law of vengeance and retribution. Or have you stepped into that space where you're willing to surrender all of your judgments and all of your attack thoughts? And it's not going to be easy. I mean, this is a lifelong journey. This is a process. It requires constant reiteration every day, every day, every day. You have to go back and over again affirm the truth in order to get yourself out of this morass of the ego. It says, once you have developed a thought system of any kind, you live by it and teach it. Your capacity for allegiance to a thought system may be misplaced, but it is still a form of faith and can be redirected. So herein, Jesus gives us that key understanding that no matter what your thought system is, what you believe, it can be redirected. You can rise above the stupidity and the madness of what is going on in the world around you, because you, by your own belief system, have created that world. You have allowed it to exist. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed the session this evening. I'll be back in 7 days, and we'll take another lesson and take another part of the text and explore them in depth. In the interim, there is a joyous experience right around the corner just waiting for you. And the way that you can enhance that and attract it and make it manifest is by working on your thought system. Are you seeing yourself as a victim? Are you living in a state of fear? Do you have unresolved anger issues? Are you still clinging to the past? See, and there's only one process that can change that. That is the process of forgiveness. So when you're on your cross there with blood gushing and that crown of thorns and feeling like, oh my God, I'm a victim, stop and calm yourself down and say, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. This whole fiasco is something that I created, and I'll surrender it to the Holy Spirit within me. I'll surrender it so that it can be corrected and I can return to a state of peace. So get out there, share the love, pass the love around. Remember, my website is at www.themiraclewithin.org. A lot of stuff on A Course in Miracles there, and all of the different video threads I produce. And I'm looking forward to re-engaging with you 1 week from now. So have a great week.